So AOC have entered the ultra-wide OLED market with their new AG346UCD, a 34-inch QD-OLED, which means quantum dot OLED, which is astounding given that this thing is priced at just under £550 on the AOC website at the time of making this video. Although I do say this as some kind of shock, which I don't think I can really be. Well, I can, because I've recently checked out the Philips Evnia 6500 ultra-wide OLED panel, which again was very competitively priced, although on sale rather than its actual price tag. I do think it's becoming more of a market trend. These OLED ultra-wides are coming down in price and I am all for it. Anyway, let's talk about the AOC screen here. The panel on the table here is a 34-inch ultra-wide OLED which can produce a resolution of 3440 by 1440p, and it has a 175Hz refresh rate and FreeSync Premium Pro with a range of 48 to 175Hz. Now, it's not really the fastest monitor on the planet, but it is more than capable for some light esports gaming and your single-player titles. Now, it does state that it can produce a VESA certified display HDR True Black 400 image if that's more your thing, and it's got some nice skinny bezels to look at and some tasteful Agon branding, which is AOC's gaming division, if you will, and it's more of a grey colour rather than black. The monitor, being a 34-inch ultra-wide, is extremely wide with a 21:9 aspect ratio, an 1800R curve which aids with immersion in that peripheral vision, and the stand is chunky enough to suit. This monitor is extremely heavy, and wall mounting it or even desk mounting it, while possible, could cause somewhat of an issue just due to this monitor's weight, so check your brackets first. The stand, as I said, is chunky and also quite heavy, and it does offer very little cable management support, but it can tilt, swivel and pan, but there is no rotation here, which I think is absolutely fine. I don't think many people will want to use this screen vertically anyway. Around the back again, you've got some quite nice large Agon branding and some subtle RGB effects. You're not going to get much in terms of glow from this, unfortunately, but it's a nice to have, I suppose. And you've got two HDMI 2.0 ports, one single DisplayPort 1.4, a USB hub featuring one powered USB Type A port and two data USB Type A inputs with a USB 3.2 Gen 1 hub speed. There is a joystick on the back right hand side to navigate the OSD, and there's not really much in terms of menus to get lost in. You have got your game settings, which you can find things like shadow controls, game color changes, the addition of a sniper scope on screen which enlarges a small area in the center of the screen to make it easier to kill enemies. You've got your luminance menu for things like dark boost, brightness and contrast options and all of that kind of thing. And finally, some controls for your RGB effects. Notably, you've got some OLED panel care options for pixel orbiting, a pixel refresh, and things like logo dimming or taskbar dimming for help with burn-in. But in terms of image quality, this AOC Agon ultra-wide panel is an absolute beast. For color gamuts, I did run two tests, native mode and sRGB mode, and native did come out on top with an sRGB score of 100%, Adobe RGB at 96%, P3 at 98%, and NTSC at 93%. The sRGB mode did achieve a score of 100% sRGB, which of course it did, it says it in the name, but then it did lack with Adobe RGB coming in at 76%, P3 at 77%, and NTSC at 71%. This did not reflect on my color accuracy test, however, where whichever panel mode I ran it in, the score came out relatively the same, with the average delta E coming in at 1.06 and a maximum of 3.80, which are very good scores and on par with what AOC provided in their calibration result sheet in the box. But of course, this is an OLED panel after all, so I didn't really expect anything different. Running a test for brightness and contrast on an SDR setting, at 100% it gave me a result of 240.5 nits of brightness and a contrast ratio of 16,030 to 1, which is nice when playing in darker environments with little lighting inside of games. When I tested it again with HDR switched on inside of Windows and with the display HDR settings switched on physically on the monitor as well, and at 100% the monitor achieved 278.8 nits of brightness with a contrast ratio of 3,850 to 1, which was quite alarming compared to the SDR mode, but unfortunately nowhere near the advertised display HDR 400. But because of the nice inky blacks and decent contrast ratio, I didn't feel as if you're really missing out by not using HDR, as the difference between brighter and and darker areas in certain scenes anyway are astounding. In both instances, my white point sat between 6200 and 6500 Kelvin, which was really good to see and did not skew much at all with the HDR mode switched on either. With the color uniformity of this particular panel though, there was a slight issue with the center at 50% brightness, and when I say slight, I mean extremely slight. With a hotspot appearing though at 100% brightness, the results were pretty much on par, with the center being unaffected with the increase in brightness, but the edges getting slightly inaccurate. But again, by no means this is really an issue at all. And then the same with luminance uniformity as well, performing superbly with a slight offset of 3% towards the bottom right hand corners at a 50% brightness, and at 100% brightness it was all pretty good anyway. Testing the AOC's monitor's initial response time, as seen on screen measured with the OSRTT tool, it came in at 1.36 seconds at 175 Hz with adaptive sync off. However, with adaptive sync on, there wasn't much of a difference, with the initial response time hitting 1.55 seconds. RGB overshoot was also extremely controlled as well, with an average error of 1.37 with adaptive sync on. And running a UFO ghosting test unfortunately didn't render the UFO characters as sharp as I would have liked because of that 175 Hz. And also there is no motion blur reduction technology here like you would find on traditional LCD panels, but there was certainly no ghosting with the characters on my testing, and everything did look nice and sharp to the eye, which translated well to faster moving titles. Sure, it's certainly not the fastest OLED on the market now, but having a modest 175 Hz refresh rate is plenty if you're going to be playing some single player, story driven titles, or even some light competitive games like Overwatch 2, which I must say did perform exceptionally well. And yes, while I admit I am still running around the Vatican in Indiana Jones, the game did perform superbly, and the contrast between brighter areas moving into darker parts of the city and also underground looks pleasing to the eye. Path of Exile, because of its incredibly dark aesthetic, looked really nice, especially when there were slight spells with my crossbow flying around the screen, and then also all of the different types of glows from fire and the red and blue magic. It looks really, really nice, and it really did stand out thanks to that large contrast ratio. And my tried and tested Overwatch 2 as always looked sharp, and the colors absolutely popped. It was a real joy to play games on this monitor. So with this aggressive pricing of £550 for the AOC AG346UCD ultra-wide gaming monitor, bit of a mouthful that one, I feel it's just a complete bargain for what this monitor can produce in terms of image quality. And yes, I noticed that I am now getting a bit repetitive with ultra-wide OLED monitors of late, but my gosh, they are just so good, and this AOC one here is just no exception to that. Its refresh rate may not suit all gamers, especially those chasing super fast esports titles, but if you're someone like me who enjoys some Overwatch 2 with their friends in an evening, and at other times playing through single player games like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle or Dave the Diver I'm getting into a bit at the moment, then you really cannot go wrong with this panel at all.